He hired his best friend. Then the business took a hit, and he was the one who had to let him go. Today's guest gets honest about the layoff that cost him more than a role on the team. Stay tuned for another great episode of Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and this is Bad Boss Confessional, where real leaders get honest about the mistakes that made them better. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors for making this show possible. Do you love running on EOS? Try Streti, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Streti free at streti.com. That's STRETY.com. Streti, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Kindest Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Kindest Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at kindesttalent.com/EOS. Mark Henderson Leary is an expert EOS implementer. He's also a good friend of mine. He's worked with hundreds of companies to help them grow and scale their businesses. His area of expertise is in healthcare and related fields. He's also the host of Practice Freedom, Leading and Scaling Your Private Healthcare Practice, a podcast where he talks with optometrists, plastic surgeons, and other specialists about what it truly takes to run a successful practice. Welcome to Bad Boss Confessional, Mark.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been dying to have you on the podcast.
I've been dreading having this conversation.
It's always so nice for me. And then my guests always come on, like in the first couple minutes, they're like, oh, let's just get this over with.
Well, I think about this story a lot for over the last 20 years, 30 years, and I don't know how much I've processed it. Even though I use it as coaching, I don't know what's going to come out when you sort of therapize me through this. Hopefully, maybe this is the moment of true healing.
Okay. Well, give us some context, Mark. So put us in the time and place when this happened. What were you doing? What was your career at that point in time?
Well, it was my first. When I talk about the first time my first entrepreneurial experience was brewing beer and selling it. But beyond that, my really first entrepreneurial experience was starting an IT services company. And in my 20s, I had really no idea what was going on, what I was doing, and was trying to scale a business, grow a business. Like so many people at that spot, you hire and work with friends and family. Anybody who gets too close to you, you can work with them. And I was definitely no different than that. And learning from people around me who had no idea as well. And I was just really at the deep end of the pool with the least qualifications. I mean, I can assure my clients, and this is a good tie down. The people I work with are so much more capable than I was when I started. They've got a way leg up on life and in business compared to where I started.
Mm. So you're a young guy, you're just starting out. How long had you been running your business for at that point?
Well, I had started another business well, I guess it's kind of an overlap. I started with a few other guys, started a business, and we got it off the ground. And I thought myself an entrepreneur as a result of that experience, having no idea how much heavy lifting the other folks had done. And so we ran that business for a few years, had a difference of opinion as to how the business should go. And that was my true entrepreneurial seizure, as Michael Gerber would call it. I can do this. I will. And I'll do it on my own. And I had everything went with it. I held all the Jerry Maguire moments, all the people who swore they were going to go with me and start this thing were like, you're going to be great. And I'll be with you as soon as you get it off the ground. And so I started completely on my own. I guess we'll call it 3 or 4 years into what I thought entrepreneurship was. It was definitely one of those moments where I was either going to, I mean, truly the decision when I went, there's a lot of story to this. I started the business in a, I got fired basically. I got fired because of a difference of an opinion. I went home with the idea that the whole plan B was always start my own thing. And I thought, am I going to start my own thing? Let me think about this because I could do anything. I could be anything, a martial art instructor, or I could be an IT services company entrepreneur. I can do anything. That's literally how I was thinking about it. And those were my big binary choices, actually. So I woke up in the morning thinking, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start an IT services company. And so, I probably had 5, 6 years of IT services experience inclusive, maybe at this point. So let me think about that. Well, 7 years. No, we'll call it 5 for purposes of this. And so I was just completely starting from scratch. Over the next 2 years, I collected a handful of clients and a couple of techs, and had a real opportunity to bring on a guy who I brought into the other business, a guy who I'd known from high school, one of a very, very close friend. And I'd hired him into the previous business. I left, he stayed, and eventually he decided he wanted to leave and join me. And that's when the fun began.
All right. So I can't wait to hear the confession here.
All right. So I wasn't sure I'll let you kind of lead into this. So
Yeah. It sounds juicy. So let's go. What do you got?
the essence of this was that this was a I was starting the business with no leadership and management experience. Didn't really know what it was. Thought that handle it was clear instructions. And I thought that's how you knew people were good, the right people, is they handled it. And so what had happened over a couple of years is the business was growing, it was getting more complex. It was a complex business anyway. IT services is very difficult. I mean, it's exceedingly easy to get wrong. There's always something broken. There's always something that can look bad, be wrong, and it's the reason the business is even a thing is that there's always something broken in IT. So as the business got more complex, things were getting more difficult, and I was assessing where people were in the practice or in the business rather, and kind of long story medium, we had a traumatic event where we lost a very large client, and it we lost a third of the revenue, and I was going to have to lay off a third of the staff. And when I did the assessment of who needed to go, it was based on the performance of the people in the organization as I saw it. And I had had some growing frustration with how things had been going, and I was trying to place my bets on. I guess I don't even. That's the way I say it in retrospect. I don't know that I was placing bets. I was trying to survive, and I was having to make economic decisions on the basis of what I thought the future performance would be. And so I was making choices around who I had hired, who was working well from as where I could see it. And in the end, I made the choice that I didn't think that this guy was go forward, and I laid him off as part of this. And it was really hard for him, and it was really hard for me because I thought I was doing a really mature leadership decision, doing something hard that was the right thing to do for the business based on what I thought was right. And I don't know where you want to go into this because that started the conversation with myself because it permanently damaged the relationship. First off, that's absolutely the fact. Permanently damaged that relationship.
And just for context, this is a friend of yours, right? This is somebody that you worked with in another business, if I understand it correctly. And he came with you to this new business.
I'd known this guy for years, brought him into the previous business. He did great work there, and then he decided he wanted to join me in the new business, which was also IT services. So he was a close friend and a known entity and a perfect A player coming into this. He had leveraged a lot of a lot of capital to get into the business. He brought a lot of business. He brought clients over. He did amazing things to create this, help create the business. And I was just and I don't know when I want to drop the curtain on where I failed because what was going on is I had no leadership and I had some leadership, no management. And the dysfunction was that I was doing a terrible job of setting expectations and I was not course correcting. I was not managing. In retrospect, I was observing, watching a very close friend fail at a job that I wasn't making clear to him what the expectations were. I mean, and as the words come out of my mouth, it's even more egregious than I thought it before, because I literally, having compassion for myself, I was doing the best I could. But what was happening is I was watching him fail and doing nothing to to fix it, to correct it. And especially now looking back, I know him so well. Like, there's no question that he absolutely would have figured it out and would have gotten there. I just didn't know how to communicate expectations for the role and to coach him into where he could have been. And as a result, I made a choice on somebody else to sort of be in that role, who later failed in much more glorious ways that damaged that relationship as well. So this is a 2 for 1. I definitely set somebody up for failure, put somebody else in place, and because I had the same lack of skill, didn't know how to set expectations, kept pushing on hope and enthusiasm, continued to be led along and lead somebody else down this sort of unclear path of, you're going to be able to run this business and you're going to be destined for greatness if you just keep trying harder. And me all along, not doing any real management, no course correction, no qualification of what the job required. Ultimately, that guy leaves because he doesn't get the reward for the effort he's been making, because he's not meeting my expectations years later, which are just as unclear years later with the new guy, different role. And it's just this catastrophic sequence of me not knowing how to set expectations, not setting them, watching things fall apart, keeping hoping, and just this trail of destruction of damaging people. It's just unconscionable as how bad a leader manager I was for that long amount of time.
Yeah. Well, okay. So just know, Mark, you are not alone. Like, I'm sure that every entrepreneur listening who started their own business has had a very similar experience. So just like, let's just say we've all been there in this particular place, because who gets a training manual when they start their business, right? You
Well,
write
lots
the
of people
check.
now.
Well,
We just drop a copy traction on the desk and say, here it is.
yeah, right. But who actually has the brains to pick up traction at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey? Nobody. And even the startup people that I've talked to, at the beginning, they're just like they don't know what they're doing. They're flying by the seat of their pants. They're just trying to figure it out and putting in 100 hours a week, and yeah. So okay, so great lead in, and you know, you are forgiven, right? Just like
Well, maybe by you. I don't know. There's at least one person out there I'm not so sure. So,
yeah, well, okay, so I want to ask about this because you said setting expectations multiple times, and for sure this is such a big deal. And I think we throw that phrase around quite a bit, just people in general. And then in our community, when we're teaching leadership management and accountability, we talk about setting clear expectations. And, everyone that you're teaching this to kind of goes like this, but I still don't think that they know what exactly that means. So let's make this really tactical for our listeners. If you were to go back in time and set clear expectations for this person, what do you wish you had set expectations around? Like, if you can give us some real examples of that, or if you can't remember back that far, what would you coach somebody on as far as setting clear expectations? What are the key things that you think are important?
part of the compassion I have for myself is that I wasn't even close at the time. It wasn't like by this much. Like, I was not close. Like, the things I needed to know and do at that time were not immediately accessible. In a world where we have business operating systems well understood, and we've got things like VTOs, accountability charts, core values,
Mhm.
in a book like Traction, I don't know if you've ever worked in the restaurant business. I know you're kind of a film
I
and
had a
theater.
bakery, so
Oh, that's right, you sure did. But it's like in
yeah.
behind the line on the hotline, there's there's this thing called mise en place. Mise en place is the concept that everything must be in its place. If you're going to survive the shift, if you're going to get the food out on time, you can't reach for the onions and find, pickles. There have to be onions in the spot. And so if you're going to run a business, it's not that different. You have to have the things in the right place. And culture, clarity of expectations, and measurables, these are the things that they have to be right there. And if you don't know where they are, and if you've never prepped these things, they're going to feel pretty far away.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that EOS is so good at doing. It's,
Mhm.
we just get that stuff knocked out. And when someone says, are they a culture fit? You don't go, I don't know.
Right.
You pull the people analyzer out. And you figure out exactly, do they fit the core values or not? So at that time, the revision of the history is, this guy was absolutely a core values fit. Man, there was nobody I would have chosen more to work with than somebody like this.
Mhm.
So whatever the core values would have said at that time, I'm 100% sure that would have been a decider. Like, does this guy have a spot on the bus? Yes, would have been an absolute clarifying question. And
Mhm.
I didn't know the difference between that and right person, right seat, or in terms of the right seat. I would have been lost about, is it the job or is it the culture? I don't know. I don't know, what do you mean by that? And so understanding what's the job. And and so one of the things I tell people a lot of times is the job doesn't stay the same in an entrepreneurial organization. So it's one thing to set expectations. It's another thing to keep going back at the job and saying, same job still? Did it evolve? Is it
Yeah.
harder? Is it easier? And so knowing that that's the role of the manager, to have
Mhm.
a finger on that pulse, to say, yeah, this person's been in the spot and they crushed it last year, last quarter, last week. Is it the same? And sometimes it
Mhm.
changes, and sometimes that's a whole other reason to say that it doesn't work anymore. But I'm looking back
Right.
at that, and I have a hard time thinking that if I did, I'm sure that if I had answered those two questions, is this person a core value fit? I would say yes. And then if I had asked the question, what's the job, and does he know what it is? I'd have been like, well, sure he does. Well, write it down. Well, like, what do you want me to write? You know? So it would have been obvious. Well, how do you know what's enough? Do you have any numbers? I would have fallen flat on that. And so I would have hopefully snapped that the failure was on me as a manager.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you nailed it just there, right? Is this nebulous thing that you can't quite name, which is why the EOS tools are so helpful, is because all of a sudden now we have a name for things. Like when we define the rules, our core values, right? These are the behaviors that we need to have in this organization. Or when you talk about gets it, wants it capacity. Now you've got a framework that you can talk about. But before that, you don't have a framework and you're just acting on emotion or gut feel, and you make boneheaded mistakes, as I also have done, especially around people and hiring people. It's like, can't you just see what's in my head? you know, and they can't, because we have to be able to articulate it. And I think that that's what's so beautiful about EOS, is that we've got these frameworks so that we can have these conversations with people, and setting clear expectations. Once you do get going with EOS, we expect that you're going to get 80% of your rocks done every quarter or better. We expect that you're going to hit your measurables on your scorecard week over week. It just makes it a lot easier. I'm thinking back to a client that I had, and at the very beginning of their EOS journey, they've long since graduated, but at the very beginning of their journey, the owners would get together and they would talk every Sunday for 3 hours just about stuff. But then they wouldn't ever decide anything. They just liked talking about it. They it just would never go anywhere, and they wouldn't make decisions about anything. And I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that find themselves in that sort of cycle where you think you're doing something because you're trying to communicate, but you're not landing on anything or coming up with an action item, a to do, a conversation, or anything out of that, right?
For sure. I mean, the clarification of thinking that these, you know, proof points and the moment of truth we force ourselves to, what is when we IDS, we get to the solve, like that's such a powerful forcing function. So we talked. So what? And so we definitely don't do that enough. And I think that an entrepreneurial business is a dynamic place by nature. And so to that point, you're going to have a lot of conversations that do go nowhere. You're going to have a lot of ideation, and that's okay. Uh, and so you get into that mode, and that's normal. Yeah, and you'll hear that, right? It's normal. It's so complex. We can't simplify it. It's dynamic. I got to figure it out as we go. It's like that. No, that's an excuse because there is a lot of waste that's built into creating a business, but it's waste, and you have to know the difference between those productive outputs and the waste, and really putting a mindset around what is the point. How would we know if this is successful? What happens 6 months from now? Where is this gonna how are we gonna know if this is actually worthwhile? So, yeah, having to force yourself to ask those questions and answer some percentage of it.
So, what happened with your relationship with this person after it was all said and done? Did things just sort of fall apart afterwards? Did
Yeah,
it
I mean,
change?
there's a little more to the story, but, that's not appropriate for this. But I think that the long story short, it was a betrayal of trust. It was I sent the message, and I think it's a very valid message. Well, this is my narrative. My narrative is that I sent the message, "This dude can't be trusted. This is a dangerous leader to spend time around. He doesn't know you could win with him, or you could definitely lose. And I don't know, and I won't know when it's coming." And I think that was certainly how I tell the story. I don't know how he remembers it at all. We don't talk a lot about it. We have since reconnected, and I frankly, out of weakness on my part, fear, I still don't bring it up. I'm still mortally embarrassed about it. And so I try to learn. I've learned from it and make sure I don't let anybody else in my sphere make that mistake, and make sure, especially when, because I don't know if you experience this. There's a lot of, I mean, a lot enough that it's not uncommon. There's friends and family in businesses all the time. And it's not the most of the time, but it's a lot. And I think it's really important to have these clear conversations about, if your family member or friend is going to come into the business, what does that mean for you? And are you going to be able to tell the truth? And are you going to know the difference between this person being a fit and not? And I think it can work really well. My story is, don't hire friends and family. It's do it eyes wide open and understand how you're going to handle it. And I absolutely think, having observed it hundreds of times, that you can have friends and family in the business and have hard conversations and survive them, and even be better off after it, even if they're uncomfortable. But it all boils down to clear expectations. And if you don't know what they are, and if you haven't talked through the scenarios, you will likely pay a big price.
Yeah. And I think, I came from a family business. I actually had to fire a brother in law once. That was good times. But it was probably the same reason as yours, Mark, is that I didn't set clear expectations about what was expected. And um, I mean, we get together periodically, and he's moved on and done other things, and but I still feel bad about it. And I think if I were to go back in time, exactly what you said there is that it's very important, and people can have these conversations when they're family members. I would almost say, for friends and family, it's even more critical that you have regular, robust, open and honest conversations. Otherwise, all that other baggage comes with it, right?
Yeah, just to reiterate that point, it's a changing scenario, and it's not just about, like, double checking. It's about course correcting. That some things have moved. It worked great before. It doesn't work great right now. Why
Yeah.
not? And be able to talk about that. What has changed on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to communication, doesn't it? It's like
Yeah, for sure.
it's the root cause of most issues, and most people are just too afraid to have the conversation, or don't have enough information and are afraid to ask the questions that they need to in order to get to the root cause or solve the problem, really.
There's a lot there, because I think that as we mature as leaders, it starts with, do we even have the tools? And I think that's one of the things that EOS is just such a nice gift for all of us. Got the tools. What are the questions you ask, and what do you need to know? Well, all the answers are right there. Just answer these questions, and you'll be in good shape. Compared to what you described, the day one of entrepreneurship, no idea what's going on, thinking it's just about having a good, solid vision and thinking you know what a right person is. So we know that's all BS once we realize how complicated it is. But then we can get good at it because it's a simple set of tools, and they don't change a lot. The answers change a little bit, but the way we do it, we just get better and better at the same techniques. But then that really invites the next part, which is, okay, so you now know the question, what is the culture? And you now know the answer to the question, what is the job? And you know the answer of what enough is. Do you have the courage to then respond to that? And that's the next level. And so that's where, like, I guess when I look back at myself as a leader, I was trying to be in that second bucket at least. I was trying to act courageously, which is interesting because I've not always done great there at all. I've definitely taken the lesser path out of fear, but I was at least trying to do the right thing. I just was doing it, without any instruction as to how to make the right decision. So yeah, I think that's so special for so many people who run businesses today. We've got a lot to lean on, and at least you can be more assured of having directional correctness, even if you're not so ready to make a hard decision.
Yeah, it's all, you know, it's a journey. We're all learning. I mean, I've been managing people for over 40 years and I'm still learning stuff every single quarter. I have a quarterly conversation coming up soon and it's like, "Oh, well, there you go. I made an assumption on that." You know,
Yeah, yeah,
it's just it's it's like that old Groucho Marx line, "Everywhere I go, there I am again."
yeah.
And so giving ourselves some grace sometimes as we're trying to figure all this stuff out is important too.
Yeah, it's imperfect for sure. There is no right decision. One of my coaches told me that years ago, and there's no right decision before you make it. It's just an idea, and and we can pass judgment on the outcome or because of the outcome. But going in, there was no guaranteed right choice. Um, Moralistically, we can come back and say, 10 years from now, how would you feel about this decision, regardless of the outcome? If you're making some sort of core value based betrayal of yourself, that's a little different. But it was always course correction. There's always miscommunication. That's always there for us. There's always, hidden stories, hidden agendas, chaos that's coming, unexpected things that are coming to us. So it's always a very, very imperfect world, and it's a world where we're constantly in comparison with somebody who looks like they nailed it. So
Well, outwardly, right? Yeah, people living their lives on social media. I don't know. I'm starting to tune out of all that stuff now just cuz it's like it's just everything is fake. I don't believe any of it right now. Um what I believe is what I see in the session rooms and I've seen some amazing growth from my leaders over the course of, them implementing EOS. Do you have any stories or shares that you'd like to, um, you know, stories that you could tell our audience about clients that you've had that have kind of broken through this area without mentioning names? You don't have to, but I always love it when I have s- these breakthroughs that happen around communication that just make all the difference in the world.
well, I don't know. A couple things come to mind. One for sure is that early on, I noticed this pattern. I'm thinking of one a moving and storage related organization that they had this key account manager that they constantly complained about. And I would say this, how bad is this person? We'd run the people analyzer and we'd kind of get an assessment way below the bar. It's like, what are you going to do? Oh, we can't. This person's got millions of dollars of accounts that run through them and we're just not ready. And the next quarter, same kind of the complaints would be there. And quarter after quarter. And eventually it got to the point where, like, okay, Mark, we think we're ready. Okay, great. What are you going to do? We're going to take a rock. We're going to commit to have the conversation, build a transition plan, and go from there. So fast forward a month and a half, check-in call, how'd it go with letting that person go? Is it, oh, it's great. She's crushing it. What? Yeah, yeah. We told her that she was below the bar, and she was like, "Oh, really?"
I didn't
So
know.
she had no idea. And so we once we get this and I see this over and over again. Once we sort of stub our toe or we get this fear, we can't challenge them. They're below the bar. If I push them any further, they'll quit. We stop telling them the truth. And then we just walk all the way around them. And it stays that way. It's like a wart. We get a little irritation in the skin and it becomes a wart. And we just allow this thing to be there. And so I constantly coach people like if you're afraid you're going to lose them, that doesn't mean you can stop telling them the truth. You have to find a way to tell them the truth. Now, if you're not ready to fire them for whatever reason, I'm not going to force you to take a risk you're not comfortable with. I don't want you to be held hostage, but if you just feel like you can't do it, that you at least have to find a way to communicate to them that what they're doing is not acceptable, so they don't get this illusion that you think they're amazing, because that's what they start thinking. They start thinking they finally figured it out, even because you stopped criticizing them, even though they've never been worse. And this happens all through organizations like healthcare, especially doctors who get kind of egotistical and abusive. You stop giving them the feedback, and so they get worse because they're getting the message that it's fine, if not encouraged. And so I coach to that a lot. And in the end, when I find these situations, I've it's roughly 20%. I say when you've got like 1 out of 5 times the worst employee that you think they should go to jail, they're so bad. When you finally tell them, 20% of the time they just look at you like, oh really, I can do that, and they crush it because they've got all this energy. So that's just over and over what I find. It's back to those expectations and the courage to tell people the truth.
Yeah, I call that a sledgehammer moment. It's just like they didn't know, and you like right between the eyes, and then they're like, "Oh, is that what you need? I can do that." And, as you said, and I would agree with your ratio. It's about 1 in 5
Yeah.
that
It's a
it
lot, right?
works.
Yeah. And so you have to go in thinking it's not gonna be 4 out of 5, but definitely the surprise happens, way more than you would think.
Right. But you gotta try. And, like, I'm always saying, like, did you have a conversation with them? Have you told them that this is what you're thinking, or that they're not meeting your expectations? Or have you said what's not working? And they're like, well, I mean, in so many words. And then this gets around to how most people deliver feedback, which is the old ubiquitous poop sandwich, right? Which is you say something good, then you slide the negative thing in there, and then you finish with something good. And the person walks out more confused than they were when they came into the meeting, because they're, to your point, they think they're doing fine. Well, it sounds like I'm doing a pretty good job. Just that one little thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That reminds me because when I run the people analyzer with clients and we get to this situation where they're below the bar, and I'll say, "What are we going to do here?" And I'm basically asking them to have the below the bar conversation or seeing if they're willing to do it. Occasionally, I say occasionally, frequently, I get this sort of resistance around the first right conversation, and I'll fish. I've learned to fish for this. Like, are you doubting yourself because you don't know that you've actually set expectations in the first place? And they'll say, "Yeah, I think the role changed. They used to report to Joey, now they report to me, and I wrote the accountability chart, and they don't think they've ever seen this." I'm like, "Okay, all right." You're not happy though, right? But you need to have some kind of conversation. How about this? How about we call this a day zero conversation to just say, hey, it's on me. I don't think I've set expectations well. I think you're going to be great, but let's just make sure we're 100% on the same page for this and give them a sort of a new lease on life. And then if you have that day zero conversation, will you be honest and have the below the bar conversation, that first strike? And they generally agree to at that point. So I give them an out. If they've failed to give them the clear expectations, we got to start there, and that usually gets them kind of off the center.
I love that. Day 0. I'm gonna steal that. Well, Mark, I have enjoyed our conversation so much, and thank you for being willing to share your vulnerable story. I know it's not easy to talk about things that we didn't do well in the past, but, I mean, I think that this is why we can help so many people, is because we've lived these things. And so when we see our clients struggling, it's like, oh, I've got a story for you. And, this is just one of the many stories that we all have. So thanks for sharing yours. Um, Any last nuggets on this particular story that you wanna share with everyone?
Well, yeah, I think that on one hand, I didn't clarify expectations for a role that was, I knew was falling short, and I don't think I had any super guarantees to that individual. But there was a worse crime that, well, not a worse crime. They're both terrible crimes. There was a more egregious crime. I think the consequence of this one, what I told you, that was the one that I feel the worst about. But the 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 next role that kind of followed behind that was no different in the sense that I was offering uh, that this person could be entrepreneurial just like me, and they could take over the business at some point or be my number two, be like an integrator, which I didn't know at the time what that was, and I from the on the other direction, I kept letting the expectations bloom and get more and more expansive, and that just made it that much harder for that person to, uh, rise to these ever expanding expectations, and I didn't have, in that case, any. It was bad enough in the first scenario that I had sort of finite expectations, and I could have course corrected that, but I had this other situation where the expectations were even more, like, they were taking on more and more risk and bigger challenges, and I was getting more and more dissatisfied, and they were failing more and more because it was like, "Just keep pushing, keep growing," and all this to say that all the expectations need to be finite. It's this trap of, if you empower great people and get out of their way, which is true. If you understand their skills and you have a finite role with clear expectations, it's possible. But this idea that people can just sort of infinitely expand is complete myth. It is a absolute death trap to think that you can abdicate unconditional accountability and have people expand to fill the void in the way that we as entrepreneurs do. There's lots of reasons for that, but the short answer is that we as entrepreneurs get to decide what's acceptable failure and not. And so as we expand infinitely, we can sort of edit the story and say, yeah, but that part's okay. But when we allow other people to do that, they don't get the same privilege. We punish them for every failing. And so this infinite expansion of accountability and responsibility is an absolute certain recipe for failure. Getting, really creating clear expectations, whether it's completely positively minded about, I want you to take over this business, or if it's just, I want this job, this particular role to have this very specific outcome to run a little bit better. It boils down to very clear thinking. And if you can't document it, if you can't write it down, and if you can't explain it in a short amount of time, then there is no way they're getting it.
I just wanna take that in for a second because I can think of a handful of my visionaries who behave in this way, right? Where they're and I think you're primarily talking about visionary types, but
Well, I'm talking about myself, which, yes, that's me.
yeah,
So,
founder owners typically, it there is no end to their energy for the business.
yeah, yeah,
And they've hired people who are really good at what they do, but they don't have that bottomless well
yeah,
that the founder owner has. And then their expectation is that their people are going to put as much time, energy, effort into their roles as they would. And the other thing is that visionaries tend to be neurodivergent folks. I speak of which I am.
yeah, yeah,
And we have the capacity to hyper focus and get 40 hours worth of work done in 4 hours. That's just how we are. We're wired that way. And we don't understand it when people can't do what we do.
yeah,
And we don't see the uniqueness or the specialness of that skill set. And what I see more often than not is when you have a leader like that who doesn't have that self awareness or can't get there, they end up burning out their team to such a degree that there's this churn, especially on the leadership team, and we keep seeing musical chairs and people coming off, and because they can't keep up.
yeah, they
So
can't. Well, and the bottom as well, and I think it's worth noting that, yeah, we got a lot of energy and in passion, but it's also passion paired up with choice. We get to choose what we work on, and if we're gonna delegate this to somebody else, they get to work they're supposed to match our expectations, which is our choice, not their choice. So, and we get upset when they make choices that aren't aligned with what we were thinking.
And these other folks have a team. That's the other thing that's forgotten is that they have, 5 or 6 people that they've got to manage. So it's an early stage, as when we meet clients, right? They're at this point, right? They're typically they've crossed over $10 million, most of them. And that is a real tipping point for a lot of people until you get to 25 million, and then it's 50. And so when we hit these milestones, that's typically when we see that, what got us here won't get us there.
Well, I honestly I don't look at the numbers, in terms of the milestones, because I think you can find them anywhere. I as a visionary hit my threshold in terms of being able to manage the business very quickly, and there's some industries and some types of businesses where the lines are somewhat predictable where you're going to see it, and it's around people. But I'm not worried about the numbers in terms of if you're looking in the mirror and it's not working, that you're at the ceiling. Like I just don't.
Yeah, way to simplify it. Very good.
It's like the classic question: when should I hire an integrator? My number two, who is my number one people manager in the business, and I say when what you're doing stops working. That's the day. It's that simple.
Yes.
And some people, can run 10, $20 million business as a manager. And if it's working well, the energy's managed well, and everything's going great, you're living the life you deserve. Perfect, then that's fine. But if you're more like me and somewhere around 700 grand, you're like, this isn't working. It's like you get somebody in there. That's when you do it.
I hope everyone listening who doesn't have an integrator takes that advice, because that is such a game changer for so many visionaries is to let go enough to that integrator when they come in that they can actually be effective for sure. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I do enjoy our talks, and we get to see each other, every couple of quarters or so and have a really good deep talk like this one. Um, what's next for you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I've been doing this 10 years and I can't get enough. It's just deeper and deeper. And so, the two areas I'm really working into are sort of ownership elements of this, because there's a lot to do with owners in the mindset and getting ownership teams, whatever flavor that are working through. A lot of the same outcomes on the same page with alignment. How do we add value to the owners? And the third portion, of course, is exit. But that's actually there's plenty of material on that. I think what I'm really discovering and learning about is what is it to be an owner before you are on the exit path. So I'll work with that, and I'm loving what I'm learning and teaching and finding. And of course, as you mentioned that at the beginning of the show, I work with all sorts of businesses, but anything healthcare related. There's so much going on in the healthcare world that is so backwards still. There's so much. There's massive potential, and you think about what is a business in this country supposed to do? It's supposed to add value to people, and what adds more value to people's lives than healthcare, healing people. And there's so much inefficiency in allowing these businesses to run great practices that give amazing healthcare, which is hopefully what we're doing. Really run great cultures, and this is the part that they're missing so much: a culture full of people in a healthcare practice that love the fact that they're working in a healthcare practice healing people. Because we've all been there. We've all been to that great doctor, and we check in, and that person behind the counter looks like they just want us to go home. And so they're not there for our benefit. So creating those great cultures. But a lot of people don't realize that, we think of healthcare and doctors and living this great lucrative lives, but particularly private practice can really take the soul and fun out of life, because so much hyper dependency falls on that founding healthcare provider, that as the more and more successful the practice is, the more they're sort of required to be the one that does it. So eliminating that hyper dependency and allowing them to live the life they deserve. So all those things are what I'm passionate about, and it's a great life. It's a great time to be doing what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one last question, Mark. We've talked about a lot of different things today, but I always ask my guests this question. If you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that either was relevant to the story that you told earlier or just something that's meaningful to you, what would that tattoo be and where would it be located?
Oh, that's a great question. And the answer really is that I've been thinking about tattoos for 40 years and have none as a result of my indecision. And so, so that's the real
I
answer.
think that's why I asked the question, because I'm so
Well,
fascinated.
so the one that's been most popularly thought of, I mean, I'll probably think of a couple recent favorites, but the one that I keep going back to is Amor Fati. And that is the love your fate quote of, it's a very, I'm going to say this wrong, but I believe it's kind of a stoic idea of really finding the passion and the beauty and the love of whatever you're given in life and where you are, and it's not a fake sort of acceptance. It's a really understand the blessing and wisdom of your current situation, and trying to be present with all your life circumstances, compare less, and the things that go with that. And it would be somewhere very visible, like either a forearm or so on the other side. I got a friend who has a tattoo in reverse on his forearm so he can see it in the mirror, and that kind of thing. As a reminder, it would be something like that.
Well, thanks again for such a great conversation and for your confession. I'm sure it will help a lot of people out there.
Thanks you for the privilege. It was a lot of fun to unpack it.
Thanks to Mark for reminding us that leadership and management aren't the same skill, and that even our closest relationships need clear expectations to survive. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you next week.